Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. Over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below. Hey guys, welcome to JavaScript Cardio Session 2. This is where I give you a few whiteboard style challenges to exercise your brain a little and also prepare you for these types of interview questions. Alright, so we got a pretty good response from the first session. If you haven't watched that, I would suggest going back and watching that. I explain what this is a little bit more. Now, I understand that a lot of you guys are newer JavaScript developers or people that are just getting into programming and web development, and this may seem a little overwhelming. If you look at this and you just wouldn't even know where to begin, don't worry about it. This is not stuff that you would do in your everyday work, but it is stuff that will really help you learn the syntax, will really help you learn about different methods and stuff that you wouldn't normally use, and also, of course, prepare you for whiteboard type interviews because they do this kind of crap. All right, now we had a few GitHub pull requests for session 1, and we got some really good solutions. Some stuff I wouldn't have even thought of on my own, but I did have to deny quite a bit of requests because people were editing and erasing stuff, and I didn't want that. I just want you guys to add your own solutions. So what I've done for session 2 is I've added an index extra file, and this is for you guys to make your changes to or add your solutions and make a pull request. Just make sure you comment out your solution before the request. You can also add solution by your name or your handle or whatever you want to do. Okay, just keep it neat. Keep, a good amount of lines in between the solution before yours and stuff like that. All right, so let's get started here. So the first challenge is the longest word challenge, and basically we're going to input a sentence into this function here, and we want to pluck out the longest word. Okay, whatever word has the most characters, in this case, hello, my name is Brad, it would give us back the string of hello. Now, in some cases, you may have more than one word that have the max amount of characters, okay, multiple longest words. In that case, we want to put these words into an array, so hello there would be put into an array. All right, so that's the first problem. If you guys want to pause the video and try it on your own, you can do that now, but I'm going to go ahead and give my solution. All right, so the first thing we want to do is strip away punctuation. So we don't want this comma here to be part of part of this word. So I'm going to use the match method, which takes in a regular expression and returns an array, basically a filtered array based on our regular expression. So let's go ahead and say const word array, and we're going to take the sentence that's passed in. I'm also going to just change it to lowercase, so we'll use 2 lowercase, and then we're going to call dot match. So in here we put a regular expression, which we have to put in between 2 forward slashes, and my expression is going to be anything between A and Z, and also 0 and 9. Okay, that's all that's going to be accepted. And then we also want to add global at the end. Okay, so it doesn't stop at the first match, it just keeps going. So once we get that, we can actually console log that just so you can see what that is. And obviously you can't do this in a whiteboard interview or anything, but this is for learning, so we're going to. All right, so we have hello there, my name is Brad, all in separate array values. You can see that comma after there is gone, so that's good. It strips out any punctuation. All right, now the next thing we want to do is sort by length. So basically the longest word we want at the beginning. So to do that, I'm going to create a variable called sorted. Let me just put a comment here as well. We'll just say create filtered array. Okay, so here we're going to create an array called sorted from that word array, and we're just going to call dot sort, and sort takes in a function. Okay, and as far as parameters, we're going to pass in A and B, but this could really be anything you want. And then we basically just want to return b.length take away a dot length. So what it's going to do is it's really just going to take the current iteration and compare the length to the length before it, and then sort it based on the length. So now if I were to console.log sorted, let's see what that gives us. And now notice that the order in this array is from the highest length to the lowest. Okay, and of course we have hello there, and by the way, this is all coming from this right here. But we have hello there, which have the same amount of characters, so we're going to have to deal with that. Now, if you wanted to just have it so it returns the first longest word it finds, you could simply return sorted and just grab the first element in the array and run that, and that'll give you hello. All right, but I don't want to do that because I want to return all of the strings if there's more than one, or all of the array values. So let's say if multiple words, then put into array. So we're going to create a variable here called longest word array, and we're going to set this to that sorted array, and we're going to use filter here. So filter is an array, a high order array function, or an array helper, and it takes in a function as well. And we're going to just put word in here. This could be anything, but it basically represents the current iteration. It's going to iterate through the array. And what we want to do is return true if the word matches the length of the first word, because we know the first word is the longest, right? We've already established that. But we want to go through this, and when it hits there, it's going to compare it to this. If it's the same length, it's going to return true. When it hits name, it's going to compare it to the first word. It doesn't match the length, so it's going to return false, which will discard it from the array. All right, so we could do an if statement, but an easier way to do it would be just to return the word.length equals to sorted, the first one, and length. Okay, so that will return either true or false. Again, if it returns true, it'll stay in the array. Returns false, it will not. So from here, let's console.log the longest word array. And there we go. So we have hello there. Now, if I were to change this and add an extra O and hello, not a 0, an O, that will make this the longest. It no longer has multiple words. So if we do that, you'll see that only this hello will show up. But remember the instructions. We don't want to return an array if there's only one word. We want to return a string. So we're going to go back up here, and we're going to get rid of this. I should have returned that, not console log, but that's fine. You're seeing the undefined because I didn't return it. So let's go ahead and check if, we'll say check if more than one array value, and we'll do that by saying if the longest word array dot length, this will look at the length of the array, if it's equal to 1, then we want to return the word, okay, not the array, the actual word, which is in the first position. So we'll say return longest word array, and we want the 0 position. Else, that means that there's more than one, so we want to just return the entire array like that. Okay, and then finally down here we're going to just oh, actually, never mind. There's nothing else we need to do here. So let's try that. We'll clear this out and run it. So we get hello there inside an array. But again, if I add an extra O here and we run it, now we just get a string. Okay, we don't get the array. We just get that one word, which is what we want. So that was my solution to the first one. Now I can clean this up by using arrow functions. So I'm going to get rid of the function, put in an arrow here. And then we don't need the parentheses or the return, not the parentheses, the curly braces or the return, and we can make that much neater looking. Same thing here, get rid of that. And get rid of the curly braces, this semicolon, the return, and this curly brace. All right, and yeah, that should be good. And if you wanted to, you could chain the sort onto this, and you can make it a little bit neater, but I think that that's fine. I think that's good. All right, so let's look at the next challenge, array chunking. So we want to split an array into chunked arrays of a specific length. So if we pass in this right here as a first parameter, an array with 1 through 7, and we pass a second parameter of 3, we want to break this array into chunks of 3. So it should equal this, which is an array with one value, which is an array of 1, 2, 3. Next one is an array of 4, 5, 6. And then the next one is going to be just 7 because it just ends. There's no more, so we can't do a 3 chunk. It'll just put whatever's left over here. All right, once it hits 3, if we added 8 and 9, that would be put in here, and then 10 would go to the next chunk. Okay, and if we put 2, the array would look like this: 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7, and so on. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm just going to go down here and change the function name to chunk array, and then I'm going to grab, let's see, we'll grab this right here and pass this in. Okay, make sure you grab the array and the length, like that. All right, so first thing we're going to do here, I'm actually going to give you 2 different solutions. The first one, I'm actually going to use a while loop, which I don't use too much, but I think that this is a nice simple solution. So we're going to initialize a chunked array. So we'll say const chunked array equals just an empty array. And then we also want to set an index for our loop. So we'll say let I equals, and we're going to set it to 0. All right, and then we want to loop. We want to loop while the index is less than the array length. So let's say while, and we're going to pass in here while I is less than the array dot length, and this array here is coming from the actual array that's passed in. So while that's true, I'm going to use the slice method, which allows us to basically slice stuff out from an array. So what we want to do is slice out from the index to the index plus the chunk length, and then we want to push onto the chunked array. Okay, so to do that, we're going to say chunked array dot push, which just adds something onto an array. And then we're going to take the array that's passed in and we're going to slice from it. So if you want to slice an array, like let's say we wanted to get just the first one, we would use 0 as the first parameter because that's where we want to start, and then 1 as where we want to end. So it would grab that first one. And if we wanted like 2 to 3, we would do 1 and then 2 as a second parameter. So what we'll do is put the index as the first parameter, and then for the second it'll be the index plus whatever the length is. Okay, the length is what's passed in here. In this case, it's going to be 2. Okay, so we want to do that, and then all we need to do next is increment by the chunk length, okay, whatever the length is, in this case 2. So we can say let's say increment by chunk length, and we'll say I plus equals the length. All right, and that should do it. Now we just need to return the chunked array. No, chunked ARR. All right, so let's go ahead and try that. Oh, I get an error here. Chunked array is not defined. That's because I forgot the ED. See, I would have failed that already. All right, so now we passed in 1 through 7 in a single array with the parameter of 2 as a length. So we have an array with 2 chunks. Each chunk has 2 values. Okay, I shouldn't say 2 chunks, but chunks with 2 values. Now if I were to pass in 3 and run it, now you can see we get chunks of 3. Okay, if I were to pass in 1, it should just give us basically just, you know, each value in one chunk. Okay, or one chunk in each value. So that's one way to do it. I'm going to change this back to 2, and let's go back up here, and let's go ahead and comment this solution out. Actually, I'm going to just put a comment here that says solution 1, and we'll grab this, comment it out. And this there's a lot of different solutions you could use for this. But for this next one, I'm going to use a for each high order function. First thing I'm going to do is initialize the array. Initialize chunked array. So we'll say const. What the hell is that? Const chunked array equals an empty array. And then we want to loop through the, we'll just say loop through array. So array dot for each, and you don't have to use a for each here, but I think it's the most elegant way to do a simple loop. So this takes in a function and basically a value for each iteration. I'm just going to use val. And we want to get the last element. Okay, so let's say get last element, const last. And we can get that by taking the chunked array and then passing in here the chunked array. What? Chunked array, and then the length. Okay, so the entire length of the chunked array minus 1. That'll give us the last value. In this case, it would be 7. All right, so it's going to do that through every loop. Now, the first loop it goes through, it's actually going to be undefined because there's nothing here. There is no last value. Okay, just to let you know that. I can actually show you that. So let's do a console log of last. All right, we're going to have to. Actually, I think that no. So that's going to give us all undefined because we're not doing any kind of adding to the array or anything. It's just empty, and we're always asking for the last one. So what we're going to do next is we're going to check if there is a last, okay, or if it's undefined, and if the last length is equal to the chunk length, okay, or the chunk length parameter, which in our case is 2 right now. So let's put an if statement here, and let's say if not last, okay, so if it doesn't exist or it's whatever undefined, or last dot length is equal to the actual length. If that's true, then we just want to push onto chunked array, chunked ARR, not push, and then we want to pass in an array with the value. All right, else, okay, so if that's not true, then we're just going to take the last and push on just the value, like that. Okay, and now let's do console.log last, or let's look at chunked array first. Okay, so through each loop you'll see the first one, it's going to give us 1, and then it's going to give us 1 and 2. Okay, now remember the chunk length is 2, so in the next one it's going to add 3 to the next chunk. Next one will add 4 to that same chunk. Next one will start a new chunk. Okay, see how it's, if I passed in 3, and we ran it, you'll see that now when it gets to 3 chunks, it then starts the next chunk. Okay, but I'm just going to put that back to 2. And if we want to look at last, this will show us all the last ones. Let's clear this up. So you can see last we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. All right, so that's really all we have to do here. We can now return it. So we're going to make sure we go outside of the for each, and we're going to return the chunked array. And there we go. If I were to pass in 3, each chunk has 3 values. All right, so that's another way to do it. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, so I'm sure I'll see a lot of pull requests for this one. So let's move on to the next one, and this is kind of the opposite of what we just did. We're going to take a chunked array and turn it into, we're basically going to flatten it into just a single array. Now these solutions are actually going to be a very small amount of code. I wouldn't say easy, but a small amount of code. The first solution, I'm actually going to use reduce. Okay, so I'm just going to do the return here. So we'll say return, and it gets passed in arrays. Let's actually run the function. So it's going to get passed in something like this. So I'll copy that and go down here and say flatten array, and then we'll pass this in. Okay, so we're going to say return arrays dot reduce, and reduce takes in a function, and I'm just going to pass in A and B. Now A is basically the starting point, and then each iteration will be B. So all I want to do is concatenate B onto A. Okay, so A is the starting point, and then B, as it goes through, it'll concatenate on, and then it should flatten the array out. So if we say return A dot concat B, that should actually work. So let's run it, and there we go. So we just have an array of 1 through 7. So very short solution. And the next ones are even going to be shorter. So let's say solution 2. And with this one, we're going to use the apply method, which basically applies a function or a method. So we're going to use concat.apply. And let me just write it out first. So we'll say return, and we're actually going to take an empty array and say concat. So you can concat anything onto an array, but we want to do, actually, you know what? First I'll leave out apply. I'll just do concat, and let's say arrays. Let's comment this solution out. And if we run that, we basically get the same thing we passed in. We're just concating what we passed in onto an empty array. So what we want to do is just say concat.apply, and then for our first parameter here, pass in an empty array. So let's try that. And there we go. So very short solution. What the apply method does is, instead of just taking a list of arguments to be passed to concat, it takes a single array and passes all the array elements, and this works since all the elements of the arrays parameter, which is this right here, are also arrays. Okay, so apply will kind of unravel a level of the array and use that. So it's really hard to explain, actually. I don't know if I'm doing a very good job explaining it, but this does work. And then the third solution, let's say solution 3. The third solution is going to be very similar, except instead of using apply, I'm going to use the spread operator, which is part of ES 2015. And the spread operator, it basically allows an iterable, such as an array, to be expanded into multiple arguments. So before I do the solution, I'm going to give you a little example of how it works. So if we say function add, and let's say this add function takes in 3 parameters, A, B, and C, and then all it does is returns all of those added together, so A plus B plus C. All right, so we have that function, and then we'll have an array, and I'm going to set this to an array of just 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so now let's just console.log, and let's say add, and then let's add the array, which is this here, but use the spread operator so it treats each one as an individual. So we'll do 3 dots and then array. So let's see what that gives us. We need to actually call a function. So what did I call this? Oh, never mind, it's already being called. But let's run this. Oh, I gotta comment this out. Okay, so we get 6 because it's basically just looking at this array and it's taking each separate value and using it as these parameters and adding them together. So that's the basics of how the spread operator works. So I'm actually I'll keep this here for you guys, but I'm gonna comment it out. But all we have to do is, let's grab solution 2, and instead of using apply, we'll just use concat, and instead of passing in this empty array with just the regular arrays, we're just going to use the spread operator and use arrays. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that and run it, and there we go. So that's an even shorter solution. Okay, I'm finding it hard to kind of explain what I mean in my head with this, some of this stuff. That's why I really don't like algorithms and stuff like this. It's really hard to explain. I'm actually not going to keep this here because I think it looks neater without it. And then I also want to go back up here real quick and just change this stuff to arrow functions where we can. So right here. And let's see, so yeah, that's good. Anywhere else? All right, and then here, let's also make this an arrow function. And since we're just returning that, we can actually get rid of the parentheses and the return, and not the parentheses, the curly braces. So that should work. And just to make sure, all right, good. So those are the solutions for the flatten array, and I'm sure there's just a ton of other ones that you guys could come up with. So the next one is an anagram. Okay, now an anagram it's going to be 2 strings that we pass in, and they have to have the same exact characters. Okay, stripping out punctuation or special characters or anything like that. For instance, elbow should equal below, dormitory should equal dirty room. Okay, they have the same characters, the same word characters. This we're going to strip out. It doesn't matter, even if we pass this in, this should still return true. Okay, what we want to do is return true if it's an anagram and false if it's not. So similar to the palindrome example that we did in the first one. So let's change the running function to is anagram, and we'll go ahead and pass in 2 strings. So let's use the elbow example. So elbow and below. Oops, that should have quotes around it. So let's go up here into our is anagram, and what we need to do is basically format both of these strings. We need to do quite a few things. We need to strip out any punctuation. I want to change everything to lowercase, so it doesn't matter that this is an uppercase D or not. And then we need to split it into an array, and then we're going to sort it and join it back so that we get the same result. If it is an anagram, these two will match. Okay, exactly. So what I'm going to do is actually create a helper function, and I'm going to call that format string or format str. All right, and I'm just going to put a comment here saying this is a helper function. Okay, and it's going to take in a string, and we're going to return that string, and we're going to do quite a few things to it. So let's go on the next line. We'll go right here, and we want to use replace. And replace takes in a regular expression. So what we want to do is strip out anything that's not a word character. So we're going to use brackets, and we're going to put the caret here, and we're going to say anything that doesn't match a word character, so basically a letter, number, and we want to make sure we add the G for global. Then we want to replace that with just an empty string. Okay, once we do that, we're going to lowercase everything. So we'll say to lowercase. Then we want to sort everything, but we can't sort just the string. We need to turn it into an array first, where each array value will be a letter or a character. So to do that, we use .split, and we use that quite a bit in session 1. And we just want to put in an empty set of quotes here. So that'll put each value, each character, into its own array value. And then we'll do the sort. Okay, we'll just call .sort. And then we want to do .join, which will turn it back into a string. Okay, so that's going to format our string. Now let's go up here and let's do, yeah, we'll do a console.log, and we'll say format string, and we'll pass in string 1, which if we look is elbow. So if we go ahead and run that, we get below, because what's happening here is it's putting it in order from the earliest letter to the latest. So whether we put in that or we put in string 2, which is below, which already is in that order, we get below. So all we have to do now is match those together, see if they match. Okay, so to do that, we'll just say return format string. Whoops. So format string, and we'll pass in string 1, and we're going to say if that is equal to format string 2, then that's going to return true. Okay, in this case, because it is true, it is it's an anagram. So we'll save that and let's run it, and we get true. If I were to put belows, even though all of these characters are inside of this, it has an extra S. So when we run it through format string, it's not going to match. Okay, these two will not match. So we should get false for that. All right, let's try this next example, dormitory. And even though there's a space here, it doesn't matter because we use the replace, okay? And we're saying replace anything that's not a word character. And a space is not a word character, so it's basically being just sucked out of the string. All right, so let's do dormitory. So dormitory, and we'll say dirty room. Let's run that, and we get true. Now we also, again, we used replace, so anything that's not a word character, I'm going to put all this stuff in here, that should still get true. Okay, but if we were to again put another letter or even a number in here, that's going to be false. Okay. So that's my solution for the anagram. So if you guys have other solutions, feel free to make a pull request to the GitHub repository. All right, so this video is running kind of long. Let's do this last one here. So this letter changes. We want to change every letter of the string that's passed in to the one that follows it, and also capitalize the vowels. So for instance, if we pass in hello there, this is what we should get back, because I is the character after H, F is after E, M is after L, and so on. It's just going to basically shift the alphabet. And if you get a Z, we want to turn that to an A, so we want to kind of loop over it. Okay, so if we get to Z, go back to the beginning and return an A. So let's call the function. So the function is, we want to go right here and say letter changes, and I'm going to pass in a single string of hello there. All right, so let's get started here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use replace, which allows us to pass in a regular expression and basically filter it and return an array. I think we used it up here. Oh no, we used match, but we're going to use replace here. So let's say let new string, and it allows us to loop through the characters, but we're going to return a string from it. That's why I'm calling it new string. So we're going to take the str that's passed in, call replace, and from here we're going to add in a regular expression, and we're going to say A to Z, and we're going to use a global we're going to use global and I, which is case insensitive, so it doesn't matter if it's in uppercase or lowercase. And then it takes in a function as a second parameter, and we're going to pass in char so that we can access the current character of the iteration. And then first thing we'll do is check to see if it's a Z, because remember, if it's a Z, it should be an A. Okay, it should return an A. So let's do an if statement here, and we'll say if char is equal to Z, or char is equal to uppercase Z, then we want to return a lowercase a. All right, else, okay, so basically if it's any other character than a Z, then we want to return, and we're going to use the string object here, and it has a function or a method called from char code. Now every letter in the alphabet has a character code. All right, so we want to take the character and we want to call char code at, so that will give us the actual character code, and we want to just add one to it, okay, which will give us the next character, the next letter. So let's actually console log now, or we'll just return. Let's return new string. Okay, and if I go ahead and run this, there we go. So we get, basically we're getting this hello there with each letter added one. And if it's a Z, let's do hello there's. If it's a Z, you'll see that it turns to an A. All right. Now, one thing that I forgot to do was lowercase everything, because since we have an uppercase H here, you'll see the I is uppercase. If I were to make that a lowercase and run, now we have a lowercase I. I want it to, at this point, just make everything lowercase. So I'm going to say string dot to lowercase and then replace. So now if we run that, whoops, I don't have a dot here. So string dot to lowercase dot replace. There we go. So now everything is lowercase. Now remember, the second part of this is to capitalize any vowels. So we're going to go right here, and I'm just going to take that new string. This is why I used let, because I'm going to set it equal to whatever the new string is currently, and then use replace again, and then pass in here a regular expression, which will be any vowel. So we'll say we're going to use literals here and say if it's an A or an E or an I or an O or a U, and then we just want to add global and case insensitive, and then it takes in a function, and for this we'll say vowel, because it's going to be a vowel, and all we want to do is return vowel dot to uppercase. Okay, so now if I save that and we run it, and now you'll see I is uppercase because it's a vowel, U, I again uppercased. All right, so any vowels will be uppercased. All right, so that is my solution. One thing I want to do is just clean this up by making this into an arrow. So I'm going to get rid of the function and put an arrow here. Since this is just one parameter, we don't even need the parentheses. And yeah, that should be good. We could clean this up. We could make this into a ternary, but I think I'll just leave it like that. And then for this one here, let's get rid of the function. And since it's just this one return, we can get rid of this stuff. We don't need the return keyword or the curly braces. I hate when it does that. All right, so let me just try that one more time. All right, so still works. And I think that's all that I need to clean up. Yeah. All right, guys, so hopefully you enjoyed this. I know some of the stuff is hard for me to explain, and I apologize if it's not completely clear. But, you know, watch other tutorials on this stuff. If you want to learn more about a method, visit the MDN documentation and read all about it and get familiar with it. It's good to know a lot of this stuff, even stuff like character codes, different regular expression methods, regular expressions themselves. My Modern JavaScript from the Beginning course has, I think, 4 lectures on regular expressions. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description. But yeah, so if you want to make a pull request, that's fine. Just again, make sure you use the indexextra.js file and you just keep things neat, and you can put your name in the comment, and yeah, so that's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Coding Dojo is a programming school that turns beginners into developers in only 14 weeks. If you're serious about landing a career in tech but lack the formal education or background, Coding Dojo will get you there in no time. With over 3,000 graduates to date, over 90% of their grads land jobs within 3 months of graduating, often making over $70K per year at tech firms of all sizes, from companies like Google to local startups. To learn more, visit codingdojo.com or click the link in the description below.